Hi Brad. Nice shirt. By the way, did you see the General Motors IPO today?
Hi Sally, thanks. I picked it out myself. It matches my complexion. How could I miss the IPO? CNBC has been talking about it all day. I sure wish I could have gotten some of it. I was thinking of buying some as soon as it starts trading.
Ha 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 ha. You really crack me up, Bradley. Why would you want to buy it?
The people on CNBC are saying it was oversubscribed by 6 times. They output as much money as they had in it. They have zero debt on their balance sheet.
Ha 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 ha. Okay Brad, please stop. You're gonna make me pee. No debt. Ha 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 ha. Do you know that this GM is the same GM that the American taxpayer bailed out about a year ago?
Yes, I know, but apparently they have cleaned up their act and are much more stable. I heard they paid back the government.
Oh boy Brad. I really wonder how you got this job sometimes. GM took $50 billion from the government. They had a schedule devised to break down their payments. They paid the loan obligation of roughly $7 billion. That means they still owe us $43 billion. Brad. That is a lot of money. They are owned by the U.S. government. Even with no bond interest to pay or dividends, they still have $43 billion in debt that they have to repay the U.S. taxpayer. Although I am sure the U.S. government isn't expecting full repayment of our taxpayer funds. Why would they? Their influence in the company is monumental. The fairy tale that GM is a public company is a farce. It is a shell of a company. Look at how successful the government has been with the other companies it has backed. Freddie Mac, Fannie Mae, and Sallie Mae. Just to name a few. The idea behind the bailout was another trick by the government that dressed up the $50 billion as $7 billion in loans and $33 billion in an ownership stake.
Well, somehow they did something to get zero debt on their balance sheet. Isn't that what happens when companies file for bankruptcy?
I guess to structure the debt in such a way as they did gives the appearance of no debt on the balance sheet, but for that statement to be made without further explanation is bordering on what I would deem a malicious intent to deceive.
Maybe they have the debt but it just isn't on the balance sheet.
Ha 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 ha. You make this job interesting, Brad. You are actually smarter than you come across sometimes. This may be just like the change in mark-to-market accounting they made after the toxic asset purchases by all the banks was threatening to cause a stock market crash.
Huh?
In 2008, the banks had all of those poor investments in mortgage-backed securities. The values of those securities were all tied to the housing market, which was a bubble that was popping. The balance sheets were starting to all show that their debt and losses were becoming way too big for a successful business to bear. So instead of allowing these banks to just fail and suffer the consequences of their ridiculously poor decisions, the government changed accounting rules and procedures that allowed these banks to take their horrible toxic debt and essentially put them off balance sheet. The banks decided what the valuations of these assets were based on their own ridiculously rosy forecasts.
I think I remember something like that happening. But if they didn't take drastic steps, the whole global economy would have come to an abrupt standstill and collapsed entire nations.
No, Brad. We would have had a stock market crash. That's all. It happens. When ridiculous events take place such as what occurred in the years leading up to 2008, companies need to go out of business. The stronger companies survive and the ones that emerge through all the strain become better, stronger companies. What is going on nowadays is the opposite of what once made us the envy of all nations. We are using government in a way that our founding fathers never dreamed of. Well, they did dream of it, because they put the amendment in our Constitution that enables us to bear arms and stand up to a tyrannical government if need be. But the bailout of General Motors is just the latest chink in an armor that is only as strong as its weakest link.
But with GM back in business, at least our economy can get a boost in some sense.
You can justify a lot of bad behavior with different small arguments here and there, but the crux of the matter is that government has no place whatsoever to change rules after the fact. Decide who should and who shouldn't stay in business. and become a backstop for failing businesses just because they believe they know better, and convince you that they do. Part of capitalism is failure. Another part is someone of stronger financial prowess being able to reap the rewards from such failure by buying that failed company for pennies on the dollar and then running the company in a far more efficient manner, learning from the mistakes of the inept previous owners.
I guess so. That makes sense. No one would come to my aid if I owed too much money to someone.
Exactly, Brad. You are getting the point.
So the old shareholders of GM all lost their money, right?
Yes. I think the stock now trades for 18 cents. Which is also hilarious, but whatever.
Knowing that they still owe so much money and that this is very similar to what the government did with the banks makes me a bit more wary to buy the stock now. It seems like this is all a lot of paper shuffling and not very trustworthy. I guess you can think that even if GM fails again, the government would probably just change a few more rules, or something, but I don't think I want to support that type of behavior. I'd rather buy a stock whose company exercises more prudent management qualities and leadership skills. Artificially inflated companies make me very, very uncomfortable. If these companies and the government think it is okay to play tricks with accounting and lending procedures, there's no telling what their next trick will be. I think they said the government still also retains something like a 62% ownership of GM after the IPO, and the stock has to go to 53 for the government to recoup their losses. I don't think there are any instances of a well-run government business. From the post office, to the schools, Social Security, their intervention with the airlines, Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac. And now, they are promising to magically not screw up on their next venture into healthcare. Lovely. Our debt is ballooning into the trillions of dollars. I never even learned about what $1 trillion was growing up in school because I don't believe any reasonable person would have guessed that it would be the way we were describing almost anything, never mind our national debt. Thanks, Sally. I think I'll continue my research into these cloud computing companies. I find the potential for that industry to be far more interesting.
Wow. Brad, you never cease to amaze me. Perhaps if we could just work on your wardrobe decisions, there's a chance we could actually be seen in public.
Did you say pubic?
Never mind. Grow up, Brad.